please rise. And I'd like our board to respectfully acknowledges that we're located in the ancestral, traditional, and unceded indigenous territories of the Algonquin peoples. Mr. D'Amico, could you lead us in prayer, please?
In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. O God of all goodness and grace, we praise you and bless your holy name. We thank you for calling us to lead and serve in the field of Catholic education. Help us to be true to that calling, to be women and men of faith, hope, and love. May we lead with vision, courage, and compassion, and serve with humility, gentleness, and kindness. In your name we pray. Amen. Father,
Amen.
Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. And I'd also like to note that we pray for our staff and students and extended family members who have lost lives due to COVID-19 and for other reasons. We keep in our prayers today Mary Garnett, mother of Robert Garnett, vice principal at Holy Trinity High School, and Shane Nolan, brother of Justin Nolan, lead teacher at McHugh Education Center. May they and others keep their memory at all times as we go through difficult, challenging times in COVID. We do this in your name. Amen. Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.
I would like to introduce Superintendent Manuel Seguin, and she's going to introduce a very special person that's going to lead us with the Old Canada. Superintendent Seguin. Unmute yourself, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'd like to start by saying that during COVID-19, the sign language interpreters have become very popular. Actually, they have become role models. So it is a deep learning, certainly opportunity for us to learn how to sign language, O Canada. At Divine Infant, this is what they are doing. So through Tanya Gamache, who is the principal of that school, her leadership, and obviously through her pianist, Michelle Seguin, she's a primary language class teacher, so she is a spec ed teacher, and as well with a amazing educational assistant, Maribeth McGowan, who will sign O Canada. Please know that they are accompanied by the violinists, the family of Alexander, grade 5, Elizabeth, grade 8 at St. Matthew, and the mother, Alla. And this is the Paravalov family. So we're very happy to introduce the O Canada, which is a sign language activity at Divine Infant.
Thank you very much.
Mark.
Yes, Father.
I was not able to connect immediately, so I worked for about 5 minutes to get here. But I would say the following. We pray for our staff and students, extended family members who have lost their lives due to the COVID-19. And we remember in a very special way Mary Garnett, mother of Robert Garnett, vice principal at Holy Trinity High School, and Shane Nolan, brother of Justice Nolan, lead teacher at McGill Education Center. May they and all our faithful departed through the mercy of God rest in peace. Amen.
Thank you very much, Father. Right now, I'd like to introduce Superintendent Mary Doherty and Student Trustee Amir Goni, and they're going to present a video to us. Welcome, ladies.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll start very briefly just to introduce a young lady that needs no introduction, and that would be one of our student trustees, Namir Goni. I would like to thank Natalie Rodriguez, who is one of the members of our communication department, for all her work working with Namir on this video. And I'm going to turn it over to Namir to just give a brief reflection on the work she did, and then we'll get to enjoy the video. So I'll turn it over to you, Namir.
Hello, I hope you guys are having a good evening. The FAQ video overall was an amazing experience. We used the teleprompter, which was new to me because I've never used a teleprompter before. And it helped me feel much more comfortable and personal because it felt like I was having a conversation rather than talking to a camera. Natalie Rodriguez is an amazing creative. She's definitely a great asset to the Ottawa Catholic School Board. And the communications department overall is exceptional. And I've heard a lot of great feedback from my peers, and they're very thankful that the school board social media is more interactive and appeals to them. And it's such easy access to very important information that they might have not had access to before. So overall, great experience. I wish I could have done it alongside Patrick, but I'm sure in the near future, Patrick's going to be able to film a video like this.
Thank you, Namir. At this point, we are going to present the FAQ. So I'll turn it over to my colleague for that.
This school will be unlike any other we've seen before. Virtual Academy. Remember, we're still a part of our school communities, and as your student trustees, Patrick and I will still attend board meetings to ensure your student voice is heard. I have a lot of questions, and I'm sure you do too. Some of you already reached out to me, and while I don't have all the answers, I'm going to try to answer the top questions I've been hearing from you. Right now, schools are working to rebalance classes to change students that selected distance learning instead of in-person learning. Once that task is done, you will receive an email or message from your school prior to the first day of school to let you know if you're in either cohort A or cohort B. For high school students, we need to complete one full semester, which is 2 quadmesters, before we can switch to distance learning through the virtual academy. Depending on the number of requests, the changes may require teachers to move from in-class to distance learning and vice versa. So there needs to be time between semesters to make this work. If you have special circumstances, talk to your school guidance counselor and they'll try and help you out. The same goes for high school students who have chosen distance learning who want to switch to in-person. Yes, please contact your school vice principal or your guidance counselor if you need a Chromebook to support you with distance learning. The school does not have enough devices for every student, but for those that need help, they'll work this out with you. Yes, most of the work is web-based, so any device that connects to the internet should work. Unfortunately, no, we won't have access to our lockers, but we can keep our belongings with us in our backpacks. The reason for this is that public health has advised against students gathering in groups, and not being in hallways at lockers will keep us safe. The school board is revisiting this as winter approaches. Yes, we will have breaks. Our teachers will build in breaks to give us an opportunity to stretch and move around, and sometimes they will be outside too. And we're allowed to eat in most classrooms during the day, except for maybe not the chemistry lab. Since we will have less than half of the students at school on any day, we will also likely have access to the cafeteria, but your school principals may decide to have separate lunch breaks for each grade. Yes, at the end of each quadmester, there will be 2 days allocated for a final exam or a rich summative task. Unfortunately, not all extracurricular activities can be offered online. Each activity online will play out different depending on the club itself, the students, and the supervisor. Public health has advised against students meeting together since this adds to our in-person contacts, and they want to keep that limited. I'm sure you still have questions, so I encourage you to check out the OCSB website regularly. There's a frequently asked questions page that is routinely updated, and it's divided into sections to make it easier to get through. Things are changing fast, and it's hard to keep up. So check out the OCSB's Instagram, Facebook, and our Twitter, as well as our OCSB students account on Instagram and Twitter, where Patrick and I will be posting updates concerning all things that have to do with you. I know it's going to be a crazy year, but Patrick and I are here for you. Enjoy the last days of your summer, and I'll see you soon.
So this was obviously put together before school started, but I get goosebumps watching it, and I see some trustees applauding Namir, and students like Namir and Patrick are why we're in education. So we're very proud of that.
Fabulous video. Thank you very much for your work, and obviously got the message out to the students that you're going to be in constant communication with them. Do you have anything else you'd like to say?
I'd just like to thank the communications department once again, because my peers are very thankful that information is so easily accessible.
Perfect. Thank you. Superintendent Donahue. Trustee Lawrence. Do we have a question or comment?
No, I'm sorry, sir. I didn't have my hand up, but it was just, I've watched that a couple of times and it's a wonderful video. That's
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody have any questions or comments to the presenters? Trustee Moore.
Thank you. Namir, you did a great job. I thought you actually knew all the information. You weren't reading it. Did you get questions from your friends about things that you didn't cover that they're interested in?
Yes, I got a few questions about how co-op was going to work, but at the time, Natalie didn't have answers to that, and neither did whoever was giving me the information. So I didn't answer that specifically, but I know that that question has been answered.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you, ladies. We'll carry on with item D of the agenda. We have no delegations, no public session. Can I get approval for the agenda, please? Trustee Curry and Trustee Warren. That the agenda for the regular board meeting of September 22nd be approved as presented. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Declarations of conflict of interest. Seeing none. Confirmations of the minutes of the regular board meeting of September 8th, 2020. A mover, please. Trustee Armstrong. Seconded by Trustee Lawrence. That the minutes of the regular board meeting of September 8th, 2020 be adopted as presented. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. No unfinished business from previous meetings. No trustee motions. Presentation and consideration of committee reports. Committee of the whole board, September 22nd, 2020. Madam Vice Chair?
I don't believe I have anything to report.
Thank you. Item 2, memo from the Superintendent of Finance Administration, minutes of the Audit Committee of May 19th, 2020.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair. These minutes are forwarded for receipt.
Thank you. Discussion or questions? Can I have a mover, please? Trustee Coburn? Seconded by Trustee Moore. That the memorandum from the Superintendent of Finance Administration dated September 15, 2020, containing the May 19, 2020 Audit Committee meeting minutes for the regular session be received. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Item L1, presentation and consideration of staff or trustee reports. Memo from the Superintendent of Continuing Community Education, Summer Learning Program. Welcome, Mr. Bellotti and Ms. Armstrong.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. I'm certainly pleased to be here this evening with Jeannie Armstrong, who's a principal of St. Isidore's School, as well as principal for our summer learning program. Mr. Chair, as you know, many of our summer programs had to switch to an online or virtual format in a very, very short period of time. Summer learning program was one that was actually mandated that it could only be provided on an online format. Now, sometimes there's a silver lining, and in this case, what we were able to do was expand and add an additional school to the program since it was in that virtual format. So this year, I'm pleased to indicate that we were able to support some students from the St. Anthony School community. Before I turn it over to Principal Armstrong, I would like to mention that in October, the Institute for Educational Leadership publication will be publishing 2 articles written by Principal Armstrong. One is on distance learning, and another is a reflection on the move towards distance learning. So I think this speaks to the caliber of principal leadership that we've been benefiting from with our summer program. So with that in mind, I'd like to pass it over to Jeannie to provide information and share the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Bellotti. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll now present my screen. So as Mr. Bellotti said, I'm very proud to present the Summer Learning Program report for 2020. The theme of the program was Going the Distance, and this graphic was created by one of our teachers in the program. As he also mentioned, we usually can typically support between 6 and 7 schools. Because we moved to a virtual format this year, we were able to support St. Anthony's. The program ran 15 days, mornings, a total of 3 hours, 2 hours of synchronous learning, that is online direct instruction for students, 1 hour of asynchronous learning, and that involved time on task independently for students, as well as an opportunity for parental support. And this was a very valuable component of the program. What did that parent support look like? It involved parent outreach, troubleshooting technology issues, offering parents instructional strategies, or just an opportunity for parents to ask questions. We had 163 students registered in the program this year. We usually register between 180 and 190 students. However, our attendance rate was extremely high this year. It is the highest and most consistent attendance rate over the last 3 years. Traditionally, we offer a focus on math. However, after consultation with school-based principals from March to June, they requested that we change this support model. So we offered focused intervention for K-3 in the areas of literacy and numeracy, and 4 to 6 numeracy. We also had the opportunity to focus on deep learning global competencies. Week 1 was citizenship, critical thinking, which was assessed throughout the program, and communication. The graphic that you see displayed, Jennifer, it shows a conceptual scope and sequence of the math learner that was used throughout the summer learning program. We love in OCSB to be innovative, and that's just what we were throughout the program. We piloted a K-1 Flyleaf resource, which is a focused literacy intervention program, and we continued with focusing on mathematical models. For example, using open number lines and making math learning visible. We used a variety of new platforms, which staff had to become comfortable with. Some they were already, such as Google Meet. We also introduced Flipgrid, Jamboard, and Pear Deck. The picture that you see on the screen is actually a screenshot of a lesson that a teacher provided using the platform Jamboard. We're also very proud to be community, and our community partnerships were at the local, regional, national, and international level. We were very pleased again to have a partnership with Wabano Programming, and we had a coding partnership with Science North this year. And Science North, as you know, is in Sudbury. The students were able to participate in different programs such as Ask a Scientist, as well as participate in coding lessons throughout the program. Finally, we were piloting a platform called Beluga. Beluga is an international platform, and it's a deep learning platform. Because we couldn't take a traditional field trip during this program, students were able to participate in a virtual field trip on the last day using this platform. Some of them traveled to Africa, they engaged in deep sea diving, or took a trip to the zoo. In addition to parent outreach from staff and also from me as the administrator, we decided to promote parent engagement through a weekly bulletin. This was very positive, and we focused on deep learning each and every week. So we highlighted for parents what the focus was for the week for deep learning. As well, each week we presented parents with a quick 2 to 3 minute literacy video. These videos were put together by staff of the OCSB. In addition, we offered a math video each and every week. These videos were created by Dr. Marion Small exclusively for our board. We also highlighted important presentations throughout the week or opportunities for parents to connect with Science North. Finally, we also offered parents key strategies to work on. Again, this was very well accepted by parents. Let's take a look at our data, and I understand that these graphs can be a little bit confusing, so I'm going to explain them. Assessments for kindergarten were done on a one-on-one basis. There was an average 9-point gain in the kindergarten assessment results, both pre and post-test. I should mention that our kindergarten, grade 1 and 2 students did so well in the pre-test that we had to write a more complex assessment for the post-test. So that was very positive. Assessments for grades 1 and 2 were completed in small groups, and grades 3 to 6 were completed independently. If we look at the graph for grades 1 and 2, you see that there is a decrease in post-test level 4, but it's because students progressed to levels 5 and 6, which were more complex questions in the post-assessment. Similarly, for grades 3 and 4, as you move up the graph, the decrease in post-test level 4 is a result of their ability to answer more complex questions in question 5. Similarly, in 5-6, you see that happening for points 5, 6, and 7. Looking at our literacy data, we were very pleased with this as well. We focused on level 9 of the Flyleaf program. It was administered to students in kindergarten and grade 1. You will see that there is a 10% increase between pre and post assessments on the letter sound correspondence and 11% in high frequency words. As well, we focused on pre and post assessment for certain sounds, and we see that they move from 49% to 80%. Staff feedback was also very important. And if you ask the staff throughout the program, they always say that they return for 2 reasons. One, they love the collaboration and professional development opportunities that this program provides. Secondly, they truly do love the growth in student learning over a very short period of time. It really is an intensive intervention support program. Of the group that we had this year, half of the teachers have participated in the summer learning program for 1 to 2 years. A quarter of them have participated for over 3 years, but we also had 3 who were first-time teachers in the program. When we talk to the staff about the guided practice portion, they see the value in this. So that is when teachers would divide up and take students, small groups of students, for focused support. Finally, we were very, very proud of the Best Practices Professional Development Series that we were able to put together at the end of the program. We learned a great deal and had to shift our practice quickly. As you may know, funding was only released at the very end of June. That gave us about 10 days to put together a program. So we learned a great deal over the course of the program, and staff wanted to share their learning with others. Late August, they created these best practices videos. And this is for teachers both in the homeschool classrooms and the virtual academy. If you look at these videos, and the feedback from staff and the board have been very positive, we can see two things. One, they are very rich in data. And secondly, they truly support the idea of teachers as reflective practitioners. So that concludes my presentation this evening. I'm not sure if anyone has any questions for me.
So Mr. Chair, as you can see, Mr. Chair, I was, from the information that was shared, the attendance rate for the students, the participation rate, the data, the enthusiasm from students, parents, and the feedback we received from there as well. All that combined together under leadership of Mrs. Armstrong and her teachers to put together a wonderful summer learning program and opportunity for our students.
Thank you. Trustee Lawrence and then Trustee Armstrong.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, Principal Armstrong. I was wondering when you said what do you think is the reason for the increased rate of participation this year compared to other years? Like, this was an excellent program. I mean, I had read all your slides and looked at it, but then hearing you present it is a whole other experience. So first of all, congratulations. And then my question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So really, I think it was because of the convenience for many of our families, right? So sometimes it's difficult getting students to a site. And I think just having the convenience of being able to log on to a virtual platform, parents did appreciate that opportunity. And even though it was a learning curve, I think the support that we provided to parents from the beginning, the communication as well, was very valuable. So they felt supported even at the beginning of the program. And if they had challenges with technology, we reached out right away and made sure that they felt supported and included.
Thank you very much. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Trustee Armstrong, then Trustee Curry.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Mrs. Armstrong, my question is, you mentioned a partnership with Science North, for instance. Were there any challenges with any of your summer learner program partnerships?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So no, there wasn't any problems. They were all, we talked quite a bit. We had a few meetings before we set up the partnerships, and we had a very clear direction for all of the partners to identify how they could contribute to the program. And I think providing that structure, that feedback, and the clear direction and communication throughout the program really helped.
Thank you.
Trustee Curry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Superintendent Bellotti or Principal Armstrong. Great success in the program, both for students and staff. That's great. I was just wondering, what students get involved with this program? Are they selected, or do they self-select, or are they from just our support schools, or how does it work? Can any student take it, or who exactly are the students who are taking this?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the sites are actually our children's support schools, and they were the schools that were identified. That is a decision at the exec level. And following that, then we also asked principals to identify students in the school that would most benefit. So perhaps those students who are deemed at risk, and those are the students that are offered the program first. And this summer, because it was a virtual platform, if there were other additional spaces, I absolutely took other students that would benefit from the program as well. But initially, we start with principal recommendations and a conversation between the site-based principal and the parents.
And a supplementary, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Trustee Curry.
And so the students and their families don't pay anything. This is fully funded by the province. Is that right, or how does that work?
It's through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, that's completely free. So this program, there's no cost to families.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
And I should add, sorry, as well, that we provided computers and technology if they needed it as well.
Great.
Thank you.
Is there any other questions or comments? Trustee Curry.
Oh, just a quick one, Mr. Chair, if I could, just to Principal Armstrong, perhaps the Indigenous Education Partnership with Wabano, did the students really appreciate that program, or how was the reaction to that program?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, they loved it. And we had elders who actually participated in the virtual sessions as well. And as you can see from some of the slides, we focused on the grandfather teachings, and the first week focused on citizenship. And that was throughout that first week where we really did focus on Indigenous education.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Trustee Curry, would you like to move this? And can I have a seconder,
Sure.
please? Trustee Lawrence. Moved by Trustee Curry, seconded by Trustee Lawrence, that the memorandum of the Superintendent of Continuing and Community Education dated September 15th, 2020, entitled Summer Learning Program Report 2020 be received. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much, Mrs. Armstrong and Mr. Lyon.
Thank you.
Item L2, memo from the Superintendent of Leading and Learning, Board Spiritual Theme Year 3. Welcome, Superintendent Keeley and Mr. Soy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, Mr. Chair, our spiritual theme unites all members of the Ottawa Catholic School Board community as a people of faith. We are now embarking on our third year of our rich spiritual theme, Seek Justice, Love, Kindness, and Mercy, and Walk Humbly with God. Under the leadership of Mark Scholik, our Coordinator of Religious Education and Family Life, the resource for the Board Spiritual Theme Year 3 has been developed, and it's there to help guide the pedagogical practice and reflection for teachers and staff. And this resource has been shared with all of our schools. I will hand it over now to Mark to introduce this year's spiritual theme, Walk Humbly with God, to you. Mark?
Thank you, Superintendent Keeley. I will just be putting up my slides up. A little bit finicky. Do we see the slides?
Through you, Mr. Chair, if you need some assistance, I have them queued up as well. Let me know.
That would
I
be
haven't
great.
seen them yet, so.
That would be great. Superintendent Edwards, if you could put them up, please. So when we look at our theme, it was a collaboration done, and I'd have to give thanks to the other members of my team, Jennifer Quinn, our religious education consultant, K-6, our faith animator, Father George Monahan, the leadership of our superintendent last year, Shelley Montgomery, and our office assistant, Sarah Giramonti, for putting together our spiritual theme for the third year. If you could advance the slide, please, Jeff. We are now entering into the third year of our spiritual theme, and the final verse within this passage from Micah about walking humbly. We are going to celebrate humility very much so this year with some of the challenges that we face. If we could please advance. We look at the Holy Father, Pope Francis, and the name that he selected, Francis, embodies humility. And it's through this humility that we can begin prayer. We can begin our journey together as we walk along together. We work on our listening, and of course, he embodies the practice of inclusion, which we will do through the equity lens in the spiritual theme document this year. If you could please go ahead. As we transitioned last year from loving kindness and mercy to this year, walking humbly with God, we had a little bit of a break last year during the theme, physically, that we couldn't be together. But the spirit of our theme of loving kindness and mercy really was shown as how we dealt with some of the challenges. Now that we are here together and moving forward into the new school year and into this theme of walking humbly with God, it's very reflective and a reminder to us about how when we approach each other in these difficult times, that we do have the soft eyes and the open heart, and we practice that virtue of empathy because many are struggling and we want to support them as we're moving along. You could please advance. The spiritual theme document for this year, which was shared with all of you and with our schools, is within the same format as the previous 2 years to honor the original contribution of my predecessor. We did add a blessing for CISPA based on the recommendation by Trustee Lawrence last year, but our quotes are there, the scriptural passages that reflect humility, our mentor texts for all divisions and all grade levels, our prayers, our music selections, and some activities that are related to our deep learning model and the Catholic graduate expectations. If you could please go ahead. One part of the spiritual theme document reflects the 12 degrees of humility of Saint Benedict. Now, granted, these are a guideline provided for monks living in a monastery, but some of the practices there really help us embrace the humility, to have those moments of silence, to have those moments of reflection, to work on our calmness in times of adversity, and to always remember that we always have room to improve. Please move forward. This year, going into all of our schools, our visible symbol for walking humbly is a miniature sculpture of footprints by the master sculptor from Kitchener, Timothy Schmalz. So this image of Christ carrying us is very reflective that we have our faith that we can lean on and within community through the guidance of Christ to move forward. Please advance the slides. The focus for this year is around accompaniment. And Pope Francis speaks about accompaniment, and he reflected it in the Renewing the Promise document that the Ontario bishops put together for us. So when we're talking about the accompaniment for this year, it's to remind us when we're walking alongside each other that we listen, that we take the opportunity to share our gifts and our talents and to teach others and to learn from others. Because this is all a very transformative act, that we are the voices that change. We are the voices that challenge. If we can go back, sorry, Jeff, there's one point that I want to make here. When we look at our partner organizations, in our Loving Kindness and Mercy, we participated in the North of 60 project with the St. Vincent de Paul Society. We are going to continue that relationship this year. How that's going to look, we're still in discussions around that. Of course, our relationships with Development and Peace and Chalice, but also getting ready for the year of Walking Humbly. We had some initial discussions with the Catholic Center for Immigrants, and we are going to be meeting with them again next week just to see what kind of activities we're able to do and what possibilities that we have with them in this year of Walking Humbly. Please move ahead. This is our intersection that we're looking at in between the 6 C's of deep learning and their corresponding expectations in the the Catholic school graduate expectations. So when we are looking at walking humbly, it gives us that opportunity to take a look at virtue education and the 7 virtues. We can also relate it to the 7 grandfather teachings and character education overall. In these ways that we are dealing now in being innovative, more so, it's that opportunity to have that collaboration to discuss different ways on how we can address some of the challenges that we're having now in this pandemic time that we're in. We're looking at promoting citizenship and responsible citizenship through the equity lens, listening to the voices of all the members of our community to address their needs the best that we can and help each other. Moving forward, please. And then in our final slide, there's a continuation through the whole 3 years that when we're moving into the future with other spiritual themes, we still will be connected to our initiatives. When we look at our Indigenous education and truth and reconciliation, we have Orange Shirt Day coming up to commemorate on the 30th of September. And we are also looking at possibilities around Red Dress Day on the 5th of May in 2021. Our environmental education piece holds steady, and then our focus on our mental well-being through the lens of the dignity of all. That is the presentation. Are there any questions?
Thank you very much. Any questions or comments? Trustee Curry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is just a question for Mark or Deb or perhaps Father Peter. The spiritual theme is walk humbly with God. What is the difference between that and, say, a statement like walk with humility? Is there a difference? What makes it so special that it's walk humbly with God rather than just walk humbly or walk with humility?
Well, thank you, Mr. Curry, for the question. The question about, walking in humility with others is something that we can do, but when we're putting it through the lens of walking with the Creator, it reminds us that there is always something greater than us.
And a supplementary, Mr. Chair?
Go ahead.
So the last slide you showed there with the 3 Indigenous and environment and well-being, why it doesn't make any mention of faith or where does the God aspect of all this come in?
Within the last slide?
Well, yeah, particularly in the last slide, but anywhere in the spiritual theme.
I'm sorry, I could ask you for some clarification so that you don't have any mention of faith within the spiritual theme document?
No, well, just in that last slide, which are the 3 things that we're going to focus on.
Oh, the keeping with the initiatives. When we are focusing on these initiatives, Trustee Curry, it's a given that we are doing it through our Catholic lens and our faith. That we will always reflect on these through Catholic social teaching, through the commandments, through virtue.
Okay, no, I accept that. That's great. Okay, thank you very much.
Any other questions or comments? Trustee Armstrong.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Just to follow up to Trustee Curry's mention of slide 10, I think that the focus on accompaniment and reaching out to new partnerships kind of moves into slide 10. But my question is, with this focus on accompaniment, would you say that this year in particular, we are reaching out more than usual to make new partnerships?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Trustee Armstrong, for your question. We're always looking to widen our network. We're always looking to make new partnerships, but the organizations that we partner with have to align with what our spiritual theme is and what we're planning to do. So in this year, yes, when the needs are greater, we will always look for the opportunities to help. Sometimes the organizations will come and reach out to us, and sometimes just by a God incident, we are introduced to others and we're able to make these relationships.
Just a follow-up comment, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
That I was very impressed by the document, and I think in our circumstances, it's a very relevant focus.
Trustee Lawrence.
Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mark and Superintendent Cayley. I'm going to get the name wrong because I've been dealing with it for so long. I go by their old name, but Catholic Immigration. How would you work? I think that's great. How would you work with them? What do you envisage happening there? I know you haven't met yet, but coming from our end of it as the board, what would you hope for?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Trustee Lawrence, for that question. We're looking to help. So if we have, my understanding is that in this situation now, like immigration has kind of slowed down a little bit with entry into Canada, but there still are needs. So at the end of last year, I know that we had provided assistance to some of our new citizens to Ottawa by providing for them some groceries and such. We would ask them what their needs are and look to help provide them for the needs that they have.
Okay, so it's not on an education basis as such, as much as a model of assisting them with their material needs.
As of right now, from our preliminary, that was it.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you very much for your presentation.
I think Jeremy has something. Jeremy?
Yeah, I'm waving at you, Mark.
Okay, there he is. I'm going to
Thank you, Chair.
And then Father Saunders.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to the presenter, just a question around, you referenced some initiatives that will relate to the Indigenous community, some mental health things, the environment. Just curious to know, in the final year of our spiritual theme, what you might be doing to work with the LGBTQ2 community and support the dignity of the individual and support those students within our high schools.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Trustee Whitted, for that question. So over the last couple of years, we have been working on professional development opportunities for our staff and had presenters come and educate us around LGBTQ plus challenges that we have. We have had Diversity Day, one day of the year to the high school classes. This is still an ongoing project initiative that we're looking at because it's very important that all members of our school community feel safe and feel included. It's just working around the language of it and how to approach it. And we have our equity advisor here at the board, Monte Malepo, who is providing a lot of guidance in that sense.
Trustee Whitted? Good?
That's all for me, Chair. Thanks.
Okay. Father Saunders. Unmute.
That should be better. Is that all right?
Yes.
and be community is not only reserved for the school community. I think we are a human race and we are a church. And I congratulate the fact that we are making community with other institutions, that it is wider than us, and that we are able to communicate with immigrants and with different groupings and orientations. I think that is just marvelous. We have to think wider than just be community as a small, intimate group. We are supposed to also reach out to others, and others reach out to us.
Great, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Trustee Warren.
Thanks, through you, Mr. Chair. Just to kind of dovetail off of what Trustee White was talking about, you mentioned that there's some challenges that you're having with the LGBTQ2 initiative with being inclusive in that. Can you elaborate on that? What challenges are you facing, or is it more just around learning the aspect of how to embrace it, or is it just, maybe you could elaborate on that comment?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Trustee Warren, for that question. Maybe the word challenge was not the right word to use, but it's to have the proper approach, a sensitive approach, an inclusive approach to it. So, like in any, some topics that are a little bit more challenging, I didn't want to use the word challenge again, but some topics that are a little bit more sensitive to approach, we have to be very well versed in the vocabulary of it. We have to know the needs of it. We have to listen to the needs of the community as well. So it's just a question of gathering this together and putting together an approach that is best for all and best for the OCSB.
Just a supplementary question on that then. As part of your roadmap moving forward, with obviously including this as part of that roadmap, are you engaging with the community when it comes to experts and such to help you maybe be more comfortable with the conversation, or to help to build this into the roadmap?
For you, Mr. Chair. Yes, Trustee Warren, it's not an individual one person. It's not just the coordinator of religious education and family life that's responsible for this. I'm a part of a wider team with different voices, and we have our partners from our local of OECTA that are involved in this. We have our equity advisor, we have our superintendent, we have our other members of leading and learning. We always look for different voices. We look for people with experience in this because we always have more to learn about this.
No, and I appreciate that, and I understand the stance of everyone else, because I know that the board as a whole has been working very hard on this, but it just seems like a very uncomfortable conversation for you having right now with us. So not that I want to make it any more uncomfortable, I just want to make sure that it's a comfortable, it should be a normal, comfortable conversation for everyone to have as a board and as a school community in whole. That's all.
Mr. Director.
Through you, Mr. Chair, just to respond to the trustees' comments. Certainly the intent of the presentation today was the spiritual theme and looking at how we're unpacking it. And it is important that it is part of all members of our community. So I do echo the trustees' comments, but we certainly can bring a more fulsome update to the board in terms of our equity committee and the work that they've been doing with all areas of equity. Today, we really were looking at the spiritual theme and how we're unpacking that throughout the system, but we will be pleased to bring a more detailed update on how we're serving all the equity needs in the board at a later date.
Thank you. Trustee Whitted.
Just to Spencer's point and the director's point, Father Peter mentioned something very valuable in terms of bridging those partnerships and community being beyond just education. And I know that our equity team is working very hard and working with a number of people, but just more of a comment. I do hope that our, the religious education department as a whole does take the opportunity to sit down, meet with folks on the Indigenous issues from, for example, the Wabno Center, to meet with Pride Ottawa to discuss issues of importance to the LGBTQ plus community, and not just leave that to the equity folks. I really do hope that as a team, they're meeting with these community partners and becoming more educated on some of these issues, because I think that's how we'll make progress and move forward and allow students to feel more inclusive across all of our departments if we act as a team and we're all present at those meetings. So thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Any other questions or comments? Thank you very much, Mr. Solek and Superintendent Keeley. Can I get a mover, please? Trustee Moore and Trustee Warren. That the memorandum from the Superintendent of Leading and Learning dated September 17th, entitled Board Spiritual Theme, Year 3, Walk Humbly with God, be received. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Item L3, memo from the Superintendent of Planning Facilities, re 2020-2021 Capital Priorities Update. Welcome, Superintendent Vella.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. We're taking this opportunity to bring forward an update on the 2020-2021 capital priorities. Our Manager of Planning and Construction, Ian Baxter, is going to provide you some information on the status of ministry approvals and next steps in the coming year. So, Ian.
Welcome, Mr. Baxter.
Thank you, Miro, and good evening, everyone. Good to see everyone again. I'm just going to share a slide deck before I begin. And hopefully that is showing.
Yeah.
So through you, Mr. Chair, at this time last year, we were speaking of a new capital plan and the submission of a list of required capital projects for the board. We would like to spend some time this evening providing trustees with an update on where things currently stand. Capital funding in the province, as you may recall, is allocated for projects such as new schools and additions through a process called capital priorities. This process involves the submission of business cases to the ministry for projects that meet certain criteria. This is the only funding mechanism available to school boards in Ontario for capital construction that involves the creation of new pupil places. At the end of September 2019, we requested funding from the province for 6 of these projects: a new elementary school in Finley Creek, a new elementary school in Fernbank, a new replacement elementary school for the student populations of both St. Rita and St. Augustine, an addition to St. James, a new elementary school in Half Moon Bay, and an addition to St. Philip Elementary School in the village of Richmond. These 6 priorities were based on recommendations and analysis that were included within our approved capital plan. In July of this year, the ministry notified us that they were providing us with the board with funding for one of our 6 capital priorities. The 4th one, a 6 classroom addition to St. James Elementary School located in the Bridlewood neighborhood of Canada South. This addition will be completed in conjunction with an attendance boundary revision between St. James and St. Anna Elementary Schools. St. Anne currently has 11 portables on site and over 700 students. This addition will alleviate those pressures at St. Anne and better balance enrollment between the 2 schools. Staff anticipate undertaking a consultation process with the 2 school communities during the early part of 2021. These consultations typically take 3 to 4 months to complete. Both of these schools are located within the Holy Trinity family of schools. As I indicated earlier, the province did not provide funding for the 5 other projects that were submitted, including the first 3. We have had discussions with ministry capital staff around these projects, and we are of the opinion that they should continue to be retained as capital priorities moving forward. They are important projects that reflect sound long-term planning and are vital in order to adequately serve students in local settings. Priorities 1 and 2 are new schools in the Findlay Creek and Fernbank communities. These are core priorities of the board located in large development areas that continue to experience rapid residential growth and increasing enrollment. It has been confirmed to us that priority number 3, a consolidated St. Rita and St. Augustine School, will require the completion of a formal pupil accommodation review. In order to be able to submit the project again for capital consideration, we intend to initiate a review as soon as possible once we have new guidelines in place from the ministry and we have updated our own policy. At this point, we do not have any information from the province as to when the moratorium on reviews will be lifted. This project also involves the purchase of a surplus OCSB school property located on Dines Road, the former McGregor Easton Public School. That transaction will have to be tied in with the future completion of a review and the approval of capital funding from the province. With respect to priorities 5 and 6, we continue to advocate for investment in both the Half Moon Bay and Village of Richmond areas, and recommend that these projects also be retained as priorities for the board. Although we are grateful to have received capital funding for the addition to St. James Elementary School, I think it is fair to say that we share in the disappointment that is being experienced in some of our communities that were overlooked for funding. Given the significant accommodation pressures that we have, we are moving forward with some of the important pre-planning work for those important priorities, including the completion of geotechnical studies and site surveys and the engagement of architectural firms. This work will allow us to be shovel ready for construction as soon as possible once capital funding is made available. The ministry has not yet released timelines for the next round of capital priorities. When that does take place, I think it's important to note that there will have to be a revisiting of needs. Unfortunately, when capital funding is not provided as planned for, residential development does not slow down to accommodate that delay. This puts us further away from having that needed space available on the ground for students. It creates additional pressures at holding schools and eventually adds new projects to our capital priorities list. If there are questions from trustees regarding the report or regarding the capital priorities process, staff are here to answer them tonight.
Thank you very much. Trustee Armstrong, Trustee Whitaker.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Baxter, my question's in regards to the St. Rita and St. Augustine consolidation, and I'll try to go slowly. Can you explain in a little more detail the need for a new set of guidelines and an update to the board's policy prior to the completion of the PAR?
So I think about 3 years ago, I think it was in 2017, the ministry was working on new guidelines for what's called pupil accommodation reviews. Pupil accommodation reviews are really a set process that has to take place, that a board has to go through in order to close a school. As we know, the consolidation between St. Rita and St. Augustine, that would take the closure or the consolidation of both of those schools and the movement of those student populations into a new replacement school on Dines Road. We have not been able to do that. In order to, the other piece is that in order to qualify or to be eligible for capital under capital priorities, a pupil accommodation review would have to take place. Because of the moratorium, we have not been able to move forward with a review, and hence why the response from the ministry staff was that they would like us to go forward once the new guidelines are in place, once we've updated our policy to reflect those new guidelines. In order for that project to be eligible for capital, they would like to have us go through the review process and then submit the project for capital consideration.
Thank you.
Trustee Whitaker.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, great presentation, guys. As always, you always do a great job articulating our needs and putting a very valid case forward to the ministry. One of the things, and I've raised this issue before, and it may be not completely flushed out, but we're jockeying with a number of school boards for very limited amount of money, and to avoid disappointment again, has there been more thought put into what is our advocacy strategy for some of these sites? So whether it's staff in combination with trustees, working with school councils to get, letters of support written, to meet with MPPs, to lobby the minister. It's great that we put a plan forward, but I think there needs to be to avoid future disappointment, a little more community advocacy done. So I'm just wondering if we put more thought into how we might approach that for the next cycle.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think that's a really important point that's being made. What was important for us, the debrief conversation that we had with ministry staff really confirmed to us that those 5 unfunded projects, we were obviously surprised in terms of the 6 projects and what was chosen to be funded. I think the conversation with ministry staff was really important to make sure that we were not missing anything in our business cases, that they were comprehensive, they were complete. I think that has definitely been confirmed. So I think the next step, I think, as you are sort of alluding to, is more on the outreach side, on the advocacy side politically. So I think that's a very good point.
Yeah, I mean, it's supplemental. I mean, the comment that I would just say is, when and if that time comes, I think you've got probably 10 willing colleagues around this table, happy to support any ask to our fellow elected officials out there and help make the case. So please certainly tap us if you need us.
I think through you, Mr. Chair, I think that's an important consideration.
Thank you, Trustee Warren.
Thanks, through Mr. Chair. Since I've started in this role, I've been an advocate trying to get Findlay Creek on the, we have the land, but we just can't get the funding to ever build that school. I don't know if you've ever been in that area, but it's a huge, huge community that's grown rapidly. And the public board has done a great job of building the school and getting funding for that. Is there a way, what do we have to do? And this is kind of piggybacking on what Trustee Whittett's saying, is what will it take us to get Findlay Creek built in there? I know there's other funding that we need for the other objectives you have on there, but Findlay Creek is the number one that we have on the list for the priorities. It has been, I think, for a couple of years now, and we just can't seem to build a business case around that to get the funding for it. So is there a different approach or different strategy that we need to take to help get that school built?
I don't think there's a different approach other than, as Trustee Whittett alluded to, in terms of the advocacy piece on the political side. As disappointed as we were in terms of not receiving funding for some of our more significant or higher ranked priorities and more urgent priorities, I do think that we did hear some really good things about all 5 of those unfunded projects, but also Findlay Creek, Fernbank, some of those higher, the McGregor and St. Rita, St. Augustine. I think what we heard was really encouraging. So I don't think there's anything that we could have done more specifically with Findlay Creek. I think the case that we put forward was really strong. I think from a long-term perspective, I think you're speaking to the fact that community ultimately will accommodate over 7,000 homes. The need for a Catholic elementary school is an absolute. It's vital, right? It's a matter of when will that happen. And again, it's difficult for us to comment here in Ottawa. Those decisions are made in Toronto, and we are not privy to the specifics. But I think what I can say is that what we did hear in our conversation with staff was encouraging.
Just a supplement to that, do you think that COVID now will set us back a year, 2 years when it comes to funding for projects like this until they realize what the direction is going to look like or what the model is going to look like for education in the next few years? I mean, whether we're moving to online learning versus in-school learning, how that's going to look, and do they factor those numbers? Are they going to factor those numbers into the funding when it comes to opening up new schools?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm not sure I can really comment, but I understand what you're saying in terms of the potential impact depending on how long those pandemic measures are in place, especially when it comes to international students, newcomers, those closed borders. But I don't think I can comment in terms of, we don't know how long that is going to play out. We know that it's having an effect on our enrollment for this year, for the 2020-2021 school year. But it's just unknown in terms of how that might affect enrollment for a longer period and whether that would affect capital.
Superintendent Director D'Amico.
Through you, Mr. Chair, just to follow up on the response from Mr. Baxter, what we are hearing from the ministry on some of the provincial calls is encouraging, that they are looking at stimulus abilities through some of these capital projects. So we do anticipate that the next round will happen sooner than later, and that's encouraging since our staff have already done a great job of having those discussions and are clear that their business case is solid. And our next step will be to involve some of the trustees in those local areas and involve to make sure that our MPPs are aware of the needs in those communities. But I think our business case is solid, and now we'll make sure that our elected officials are aware of the needs in those areas. That will be our next step.
Thank you. Trustee Armstrong.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Baxter, again, I'm just going back to the St. Rita, St. Augustine. And so the McGregor-Eason site needs to be purchased from the public side. Have we made some arrangements with them as to the purchase being delayed? Are they okay with the delay in the purchase?
So we have not spoken with the public board specifically since the initial outreach around the project and around during that expression of interest as part of the circulation, the public circulation or legislative circulation of the surplus property from the public board. We do know that this is a tricky situation. I think that was part of our discussion with ministry staff. Obviously, those two the site acquisition or the property acquisition in this case, and the receipt of capital, those two things are tied together. We submitted a separate site acquisition application to the ministry in December of last year as required, and we have not heard anything back regarding that application. I would imagine, though, that basically all of those pieces are tied together. In other words, the site acquisition and the receipt of capital and the completion of the pupil accommodation review, from the ministry's perspective, those are all tied together as one package. Likely, we are going to hear, and I think we indicated that to ministry staff, that the public board, I think the circulation of that finished up in February of 2018, I think. So they are going to want some answers from the ministry regarding how to proceed with that property as well. So that's about, I think that's what I can say on
Thank you for that. Thank you.
Trustee Curry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have two questions. One is more or less for clarification on the St. Rita and St. Augustine situation. I fully support it. It seems to me like a no-brainer that to to come up with a new, better school, and two of our older facilities could be done away with. That seems to me to be an obvious way to save money and have a better education. But Ian, you said that the capital funding is for new pupil places. Is there no government program that allows for replacement schools like this? This isn't really creating new pupil places. It's replacing ones that are gotten older. But there's no other capital funding program. I just want to make clear, is there no other capital funding program at all other than this capital funding for new schools?
So through you, Mr. Chair, that's a really good question, because there was a separate capital funding program that existed 5 to 10 years ago, and that was called SCC, School Consolidation Capital. What they did, I believe about 3 or 4 years ago, is they wrapped SCC into capital priorities. So capital priorities, the criteria for projects, for capital priority projects, now includes consolidation. So very, very good question. And yeah, it's all wrapped up into capital priorities at this point.
Okay, thank you. And just a second question, Mr. Chair, if I could. It's great that you had those follow-up discussions with the ministry, and they said there was no problems with the submissions, but yet they provided us with no funding. And it really upset me that the public board received funding for a new school on the Fernbank lands, and our submission about a new school in the Fernbank lands demonstrates just as great, or perhaps even greater, need for the new school than the public board got approved for, and yet we didn't get any funding for it. So that was rather upsetting. I'm glad to see at the regional meeting of trustees tomorrow, I think one of our points at in our presentation to the group is that wondering whether Catholic schools are getting a fair share of capital funding. And I think they're even considering doing a study over 5 years to see what the real facts are. But in any case, I'm glad to see that you're doing all the stuff to get shovel ready for the new schools in Finlay Creek and Fernbank lands. But I was wondering, is there any kind of unique out of the box thinking that we could use to try to get those two new schools together? I seem to recall back around not that I'm old, but around the turn of the century, when we were going for funding for Guardian Angels, and there was one other new school in the Nepean South or in Orleans. In any case, and the board came up with an idea, and they submitted them as a package, the two of them together, and with cost savings involved, and that ended up getting the funding for both schools that year. So I don't know is there any kind of unique out of the box strategies that we could use that perhaps you've come across in your years of experience?
Through you, Mr. Chair, if I can just respond to the trustee's question. The difference that we're dealing with is a change in the government. So when the government did change, they froze some of the rules, and boards it's not just our board, it's boards right across the province are not allowed to take part in any type of activity that could be deemed a closure, where you're closing one particular school, even if you're opening up a new school on a different site. We have to wait for the rules of engagement, and those have not been established. That's come up over the last year in many calls, both with the minister and the deputy minister, that boards are requesting this. They really need those rules. And I would suggest that we continue to request the trustees to advocate through OCSTA for the government to expedite that process. So once the rules of engagement are released, then we'll be able to take part in a variety of creative means to try and get that project done. But at this point, we've been told through direct conversations with the deputy minister that we do have to wait for those rules to come out. And everyone was hoping that would be done by the end of last year. It did not happen. And now we're into October, and we're still waiting for the release of that new document. So once that happens, we'll know what abilities we have to proceed.
Okay, and would there be anything about that second part about some unique out of the box thinking with regard to getting the funding for our two top priorities, especially, but also as the director said, the other one sort of is caught up in the bureaucratic limbo, but
Yeah.
the first two.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, just to speak to some of the requirements under our business cases. The province is looking for innovations and cost savings and repeatability of design, and that's something that we do have to offer. We typically build schools, at or below benchmark. So I'm not sure that would be the deciding factor, but it does work to our benefit. I know that in the past at the public board, I was using tilt-up design to help reduce the cost of the building envelope. But certainly we'll be exploring that and looking at what we can do to make things more cost effective. But the decision-making piece is solely right now on the projections that we have in our communities and the needs of capacity versus and the surplus space that's available. So at this point, as disappointed as we were with the last round of decisions, they've heard us as well through both Ian and myself and through Denise before around our disappointment that our schools weren't selected, and we're hopeful that we're going to hear something positive to our benefit in the next round of announcements. And like Director D'Amico had noted, I think that we're going to hear something sooner than later as a stimulus for the capital side of things in the province because of the depressed construction market. So I'm hopeful that we're going to see something to our benefit, I think, moving forward. And I think it does make sense, as Trustee Whitted pointed out, about a little bit more political lobbying on our part to do a better job at letting them know that we do exist, and there's the OCSB, not just the OCDSB in the city, and so that we do get recognized as well. So anyway, I think we've got things going in the right direction, and I'm hopeful that we're going to see some positive news in the next round.
Okay, thank you.
And through you, Mr. Chair, again, sort of maybe expanding on the hope piece versus the out-of-box thinking. At times, what's happened, again, capital priorities, that process has been in place for at least 10 years. At times, what we've seen, I think, locally is that you end up getting, and I think we are in this position right now, you get a situation where one particular school board ends up sort of getting maybe a smaller share of the pie for a period of time. And then what happens is, and again, we have made this point, we made this point, we've made this point on a number of occasions. Basically, we get behind. Boards, when that happens, get behind. And what we would be hoping for and expecting would be a larger pot or a larger share in one fell swoop with a particular, during the next process, whether it be a supplementary capital funding process or whether it be another round of capital priorities. But I think it's really important, and we have seen that happen locally, where a large amount of capital flows to one board in one particular process, as part of one particular process. So, and we have made that point to ministry staff.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other questions? Trustee Curry.
Sorry, this is just a quick one, and it's not really with regard to the projects on the capital list, but I know in your presentation, you mentioned about pressures on Sacred Heart High School and Holy Trinity High School. And does that mean that the new high school on Fernbank Road in the Fernbank lands might be closer than farther away?
I think really, I think you're pointing out there's a paragraph in the report that speaks to once we do have another round or the next round of capital priorities, we are now in the sort of unenviable position of now having 5 very strong capital projects or capital priorities that went unfunded, but we also have continuing development, continuing pressures. And one of those areas is certainly Sacred Heart, Holy Trinity High School, and that part of the western part of the jurisdiction. So among other areas as well. So it's certainly an area that is on the radar. There are elements involved. There are the changes to secondary class sizes, increased capacities. There is a new secondary school being opened up within the next few years by the public board. So again, some monitoring will be necessary in that area, but it is certainly an area that is on our radar.
Okay, thank you.
Massively growing community throughout Canada, not just in Ottawa. I know we have plans of opening up another school or two in the future. How is that, since we're already delayed on all these other priorities, how is that going to factor in with the growth happening throughout Barrhaven?
I think are you referring to the fifth capital priority, Half Moon Bay, a new elementary school in the Half Moon Bay portion of South Nepean?
Yes, there's that, and also I believe there was talk about another high school potentially for the Barrhaven area in the future, but I'll let you talk about that.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think the high school piece was one on with the capital plan. The capital plan was broken up into 3 planning periods. The first 5-year window was what you saw in terms of what we submitted in terms of the 6 priorities. And the second and third, I think secondary needs were pushed off at that time into the medium and the longer term due to the uncertainty around class sizes and other areas and other issues. So I think that, again, that would be an area that would continue to be reviewed. The addition at St. Joseph is coming online. As we mentioned, I think at the last board meeting, we talked a little bit about that. That's coming online in January of 2021, 30 classroom addition. We also have Mother Teresa as well. So again, that would be an area that we would be reviewing and monitoring for sure.
Just a supplementary, I believe it's opening in February, I think, not January, for St. Joe's. Last board meeting, I think we had that update. Also, my understanding from last year when we talked about this is that all portables would be removed when the snow's gone, obviously. But it sounds like we are going to have a bunch of portables staying behind now to accommodate growth. So as you can see, obviously in Barrhaven and Mother Teresa, I understand that that's there as well, and St. FX over in Riverside. But for the Barrhaven area, especially by the Costco and the west area of Barrhaven, there's not a lot of coverage when it comes to the high schools on that area.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think that area is where we have a designated secondary school site located.
Thank you. Is there any other questions or comments? Thank you, gentlemen, for your presentation. Can I get a mover, please? Trustee Whitted and Trustee McEwen. That the memorandum for the Superintendent of Planning and Facilities entitled 2020-2021 Capital Priorities Update dated September 16, 2020 be received. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Gentlemen, you're back next for HVAC school updates.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And that last topic was certainly longer and more popular than I expected. Hopefully this one isn't quite as much so. I'm pleased to provide you with an update on HVAC ventilation initiatives in our schools. We'd first like to recognize the ongoing dedicated work by our caretaking and trade staff who are doing their best to create a safe learning environment for our students and school staff. I want to highlight that our focus on touchpoint cleaning, physical distancing, and wearing a face mask are our primary mitigation strategies. These strategies have the greatest potential to reduce the risk of viral infection. Beyond cleaning and disinfection, another important focus is on ventilation enhancements, which is part of our strategy to reduce the risk of spread of COVID-19 in our schools. The province certainly recognized the importance of ventilation and has provided special funding to every board in order to address their needs. We are doing our best to have as much done as possible by Thanksgiving and have completed much of the service work over the past few weeks. As an overview, all of our schools have some form of mechanical ventilation to provide air exchanges and to maintain indoor air quality. Investments have been made over the years to keep our schools in good shape and in order to provide ongoing comfort. To simplify the classification of our mechanical ventilation systems, we can categorize them as one of three types of systems. First is central air handling units and ductwork that move air across large sections of the school. The second can be localized air handling units that serve individual classroom spaces. And the third is building exhaust systems that have rooftop fans, which depressurize the building and rely on infiltration of fresh air through windows and intake louvers. All these systems ensure that there are air exchanges within the school and the building. As part of our ventilation initiatives, we are implementing measures that can have an immediate impact on the performance of our air handling systems. The first is the enhancement of our existing preventive maintenance program by making sure that all the equipment is running properly, motors are lubricated, belts are tightened, outdoor air dampers are opening and closing properly, and filters are changed more frequently. Our second measure is performing recommissioning and testing of the equipment to make sure that we are getting the designed airflows and electronics and controls are functioning properly. We have engaged the manufacturer's reps to work with our PM contractors and HVAC trade staff to test and service the equipment, especially heat recovery wheels and fresh air damper operations. This will make sure that outdoor air supply is working properly. The third measure is to increase the occupied runtime schedules in our schools. We have extended the ventilation periods to ensure that we have full ventilation during the school day, along with the building purge after students leave. Our goal is to continue to bring outdoor air to help ventilate the school, of accumulated carbon dioxide and any possible contaminants. Our fourth measure will be to introduce standalone filtration units for our isolation rooms and to support our medically fragile students. We are currently tendering the supply of HEPA units and hope to have them in the coming weeks. We look to improve our school environment in innovative ways where possible. The safety and well-being of our community is one of our biggest, highest board priorities. The measures we're putting in place will help our battle to mitigate the risk of transmission of COVID-19 through the air and try to do our part to help flatten the curve. This concludes my update, and I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions or comments? Trustee Armstrong.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So just in regards to the HEPA filtration, when do we expect to have the isolation rooms and identified classroom area HEPA filtration unit installations completed?
Through you, Mr. Chair. We are in the process of currently procuring those HEPA filters or HEPA fans. The challenge, of course, is that with the number that we're looking to purchase, we're in excess of $100,000. So we have to go through the procurement process to go to Merck's for an open market bid. So that takes us a bit longer than just simply calling one of our suppliers to get the product. So it's going to take us a few weeks to get that in place. Most likely, the goal was to have units in for the end of October, probably will be latter part of November, depending on the availability in stock. At this point, the classrooms themselves, or the spaces for the isolation rooms, have been set up in a way that they are safe as it is. There are separation. We do sanitization, and whenever we do have a student that is ill, we do have the electrostatic sprayers to disinfect the rooms after they've left as well. So we have measures in place to make sure we continue to be safe. These are just additional safeguards or measures that we can put in place, especially considering that we have the additional funding for these things.
Follow up, Mr. Chair?
Go ahead.
Just with the identified classrooms, is that process of identifying completed? And also, how many of these classrooms have been identified to date?
Through you, Mr. Chair. We've looked at all the special education classrooms that have medically fragile students, and we've I believe, I don't remember what the number is exactly, but at this point, we're looking, I believe, to order almost 140 units in total to be distributed across our system. We're also going to have unit rates set in place. So if there's need for additional units, we can purchase more. But at this point, our expectations that we'll provide a unit for every one of those classrooms where we have students that have special needs and our isolation rooms.
That's great to hear. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Trustee Curry?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To Superintendent Bala, yes, I think doing the isolation rooms and the special ed classrooms, that's great news that you're working on better air quality for them. That's wonderful. I was just wondering, what is the role of windows in today's ventilation of schools? We're talking about, although haven't got any right now that we're building, but when we do build new schools, will every window be able to be opened, or where do windows fit into the whole picture?
Through you, Mr. Chair. With current ASHRAE standards, the requirement to open windows is really non-existent in our schools. They're more of a fail-safe. In fact, if we have a problem with our mechanical systems, current mechanical systems have dedicated makeup air systems that look at the total occupant load, and is basically it's a demand ventilation type of system where so many occupants generate so much CO2 and you have to move so many CFM so it's pretty well engineered and it deals with air quality. We are able to monitor it. We're bringing in fresh air mechanically, which then becomes filtered, tempered, and right temperature, right humidity. So ultimately, the windows actually are counterproductive in newer schools when you open the windows because, again, you're introducing untempered, unfiltered, I guess, addressed air coming into the building. So new buildings, you don't need them. As far as the old ones go, they had general exhaust. They were designed initially to bring in fresh air, and so you would normally crack open a window to allow the air to be brought in from the outside, usually a perimeter heat, so that it would mix at the radiator, so you wouldn't get a draft or a cold spot in the school. So those were older systems. As some of our schools have been added on to, mechanical systems have been upgraded and have entered in buildings, and so and that's something that we're continuing to focus on to make sure that we do renew and upgrade those schools where we can on a go-forward basis.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Trustee Armstrong?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Just wondering what our current understanding of the movement of COVID-19 virus within buildings as an aerosol.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's a very good question. There's a lot of experts out there. I've been doing a lot of reading over the last probably 2 months on transmission. At this point, there's a bunch of studies done as far as air movements go. From what we understand right now, it's the virus is in water droplets primarily and drops within a close range. As far as the transmission through airborne, at this point, we don't have any data as far as demonstrating whether or not there's truly a main source of transmission or infection. And most of the results have been through close contact and lack of space and disinfection with prolonged person-to-person interactions where the viruses has spread. So that's probably where our main focus needs to be, is to continue to deal with those pieces around protection, masks, and disinfection moving forward. I think that's got the greatest value for us to reduce the chance of spreading.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you very much, Mr. Vella, for your presentation. Who thought HVAC could be so interesting? You know where it's coming from. Can I get a mover, please? Look at that, a whole bunch of people. Trustee Moore and Trustee Lawrence. That the memorandum from the Superintendent of Planning Facilities entitled HVAC Ventilation School Update dated September 16th, 2020 be received. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you, Superintendent Bell. Memo from the Superintendent of Human Resources Virtual Academy and in-person classes and Human Resources Update. Superintendent McCabe, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, everyone. You will see on page 12 of your agenda that I've included the Ministry of Education's guidelines for class sizes in Ontario. I have shared that with you in the past. Currently, our staffing officers in HR are working diligently with our principals to ensure that each class from K to 12 is compliant with this regulation. And that must be the case certainly by the end of September or ideally sooner than that. I do want to take a minute to bring back some data that was previously requested by trustees in regard to grade 3 and 4 class sizes and average class sizes in our virtual academy and in our regular school programs. I want to add at this time that the numbers are really still in flux as we try to balance classes and address any movement between our in-person schools and our virtual classes. So there will be some variation in the numbers as we do report to the ministry. However, it's important you know that all of this balancing is being done with full attention on the compliance rules on class sizes that you're aware of in your memo. So just very briefly, Mr. Chair, you'll see that there are, of the 138 grade 3 classes, you'll see that 36 are at virtual and 102 are in person. Just a reminder, these classes are capped at 20 with an allowance of 10% of these classes that may be up to 23 students. In the grade 4 situation, these classes may be an average with no cap of 24.5 students, and you'll see there are 29 in our virtual and 80 in our in-person of the 109 classes. And the total number of grade 3-4 combined classes, very few of these happening obviously in virtual with the 1 reported, and in person there are 28. Important to remember, in combined classes, the ministry does say that you have to use the regulation that would apply to the grade 3s for all students in the 3-4 split. That is, these classes must be capped at 23 students. The trustees were asking earlier about percentage of these breakdowns, and you can see the staffing officers have indicated these are virtual at 2% and in person at 13%. I did want to also just share with you, again, preliminary information on average class sizes at our kindergarten program. In our virtual program, our class sizes are approximately coming in around 27 and in person at 17. This was intentional, as you have heard earlier from our director, that we did want to ensure that the cohorting sizes in our schools was as reasonable as possible, and we were allowing more of our students still staying in compliance with caps averages, but to load up our virtual programs because they're safer, obviously, in terms of with the COVID dilemma we're facing. You'll see our primary classes, our grade 1 to 3s, in our virtual at 22 and 16 in person on average. And going through the chart there, 29 for our juniors at 4 to 6 and 19 for in person. 7/8s are coming in a little higher at 33 in our virtual, 22 in person in our grades 9 to 12, 26, and currently we're at 20 for our in-person classes. I just want to note to trustees, you may have noticed on an earlier version of this chart, and as I said, these numbers are truly in flux. That number at one point indicated 17. We did review that stat, and the reality was at that time we were reporting students who were also participating in learning programs that would be just individual. So if they were in an achievement center and they were assigned just one student, one teacher in the achievement center, it did skew the data a little bit. So we have corrected that, and we believe 20 is a much more accurate number of the average class size in person for those students. Again, in that memo, you will see the ministry information. And I did have additional information just so you know. Right now, again, we are doing our best to meet the compliance rules. We do have 263 K to 6 virtual programs running. At 7/8, we have 44 programs, and at 9 to 12, approximately 115 programs. So they will settle out in the next week or so, but that's approximately the data that I believe you're looking for. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Questions or comments? Trustee McEwen.
Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Steve. Just clarification on the average in the 9 to 12, 20, that means 10 are showing up cohort A and cohort B.
Thank you, through you, Chair. That is correct. That those numbers do reflect that of the 20, there would be on any given day. This is on average, so some classes may be a little higher than that or a little bit smaller, but that's correct. Cohort A would be half that group. Thank you.
Trustee Simpson.
I want to applaud your decision to make the in-person classes smaller and the virtual classes somewhat bigger. I have had a lot of feedback, positive feedback from parents. Very happy to have their child go to school and they come back knowing that the numbers are smaller. So great decision. And I think it would be great if we could somehow perhaps share this with the public, showing the public that we have been very proactive and we have listened to them as far as, class sizes.
Trustee Armstrong.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Superintendent McCabe, other districts have experienced struggles with the virtual finding enough personnel. Have we had any of those difficulties, or was it fairly straightforward to fill your roster?
Thank you for the question, Trustee Armstrong. Mr. Chair, it is true that this virtual reality did take some creativity in designing and building and so on. And we did have some difficulty at first, but we had followed a model of encouraging people. We invited staff from school rosters to see if there was any interest in working in virtual. So a number of them were moved to our programs. Some were on medical accommodations, and so we allowed that to happen to make sure that they were accommodated to work virtually. And that has been very helpful to support our ranks. And then certainly on a seniority basis, we do fill out our roster for the rest of the remaining positions. There weren't many of those, but there were some. And that all comes with really effective training and an opportunity for people to get assistance. There will be more of that training ongoing, both of the superintendents for the virtual programs. My colleagues, Superintendent Montgomery and Superintendent Velati, have worked diligently with their staffs to make sure the training is there so people are not just thrust into virtual and left alone, but really there's a lot of
supplemental, Chair?
Go ahead.
Mid-year, if depending on the situation, if we have a flow to virtual and virtual starts ballooning a bit, are we prepared for that from the human resource standpoint?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you again for that. The answer is yes. We believe we have contingency plans. We're taking a look at wait lists, and staffing are always that opportunity. We continue to survey people who would be interested. We have to watch timing in terms of when an octomester and when a quadmester matches up for timing and opportunity for movement and so on. But we do believe, we will keep in touch. We work closely with our unions and so on in terms of that opportunity to see where we can either build a program or we can move staff appropriately.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Trustee Curry?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Superintendent McCabe. With regard to your comments on staffing and how it's pretty good now, is that also include the French immersion teachers, or we still have a scarcity of them? And is the program being offered in the virtual world?
Thank you, Mr. Curry, for the question. Trustee Curry, through you, Mr. Chair. That has been also part of the design creativity to make sure that French minutes are being met and so on. And I know that Superintendent Montgomery has designed that. So I would say at this point, we still need to audit that and watch that, but definitely we are aware that there are some French needs in terms of virtual. We have staffing needs in both our bricks and mortar schools and in virtual for French teachers. So we're doing our best to attract as many as we can for that. But it's a fair question, and we are keeping an eye on French minutes, French programming for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you, Superintendent McCabe. Can I have a mover, please? Trustee Lawrence, second by Trustee Coburn. That the memorandum from the Superintendent of Human Resources dated September 16, 2020, entitled Virtual Academy and In-Person Classes, Human Resources Update be received. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Memo from the Superintendent of Finance Administration, read bank borrowing bylaw. Welcome, Superintendent Shimmons.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There we go. Thank you, Mr. Chair. The memo in front of you, bank borrowing bylaw, is to support short-term borrowing for operations in the current school year. So it's a routine report that you'd be used to seeing every year because it does come to the board every year for approval as required by the bylaw. It is a borrowing limit for $70 million, which remains status quo. So it's the same limit as what was requested last year and is sufficient to meet our needs during the 2020-2021 school year. The 70 million is the maximum limit that would be borrowed at any one time, and that would include a number of our short-term borrowings for operating, letters of credit, MasterCards, etc. So we really, from an operating perspective, we really only draw into this borrowing to cover our bank account in June and July and maybe in August. And that's mostly related to the timing of our cash flows because we do have 5 pays that go out for the teachers' pays in June that covers them over the summer. So there's a bit of a difference in the timing for the cash flow there. So we would dip into that for the operating borrowing at that time. So similar to prior years, I'm happy. This is your report and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Any questions? Trustee Curry?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just wondering, last year, how many times would we have dipped into this $70 million? And for how big of amounts? Are they mainly small? And then what would have been the cost of that?
So thank you. That's a very good question, actually. Through you, Mr. Chair. The portion of it, when I'm saying we dip into it, would just be for the operating portion. So we would be dipping into it for letters of credit to address some of the projects that are going on the ground. We also have 1.2 million roughly in MasterCard borrowing. So this permits those purchasing cards to take effect, which helps our efficiencies within our organization and our procurement processes. With respect to when we would dip into it in the operating, I don't have the specific answer, the number of times and the amounts, but it would be in June for a few days, and then we'd come out until our cash flow would come again from the ministry, and then in July for a short period of time until we get the flow from the ministry, and then again in August for a short period of time till we get the flow from the ministry. So the ministry does flow us to try and match our expenses as much as possible, but different boards flow the salary in June. It's a $40 million salary. That's the biggest part of where we don't necessarily match that flow. So I don't have the exact amount, but it would be in the millions of dollars, but only for a couple of days. With respect to the interest on that, I don't have that answer off the top of my head.
Oh, supplementary, Mr. Chair?
Go ahead.
In the bylaw before us tonight, I read through it, but of course it's not the most engaging reading, so I might have missed it. But what is the interest we're going to be paying on that? Or does it fluctuate, or does the bylaw, maybe it says it in there somewhere?
Yeah, so the interest fluctuates with the prime rate. So it's prime minus 0.2%. And that would be the bank prime rate. That's not the Canadian prime rate for it. So
that's the national bank's prime rate. Good.
Yeah, so I don't have the exact interest rate right now. Probably in around the 2 to 3% mark.
Oh, okay. Thanks.
Any other questions or comments? What I've done then is, because we're going to move this first, second, and third, I've taken the liberty to first reading would be by trustee Coburn, seconded by trustee Simpson. The second moved by trustee McEwen, seconded by trustee Lawrence. The third moved by trustee Whitted, seconded by trustee Warren. Is everybody in favor of that? Good. Okay. So I'll read them out now to put it in the record. Moved by trustee Coburn, seconded by trustee Simpson, that bylaw 01-220, a bylaw to authorize the borrowing.
James read, Chair.
I think I actually got to read them.
You have to read that? Okay.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to get agreement first. Of up to $70 million be approved by the board. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Second reading, that bylaw 01-2020 be approved by the board. Moved by trustee McEwen, second by trustee Lawrence. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. The third reading, that the bylaw 01-2020 be approved by the board. Moved by trustee Whitted, second by trustee Warren. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Item 7, memo from the Director of Education, update on school startup. Director D'Amico.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Since our last board meeting, we've now welcomed back all of our students to either in-person or virtual education. As you're aware, the Ottawa Student Transportation Authority continues to work on recruitment strategies to address our driver shortage and also to look at canceled routes. While transportation is being provided for 90 to 95% of all OCSB eligible students, there are challenges when there's route cancellations. And as you've heard from OSTA, when a driver exhibits any symptoms of illness and must self-isolate, we just have an insufficient pool of replacement drivers to call upon that morning to pick up the route. So this is the reality during a pandemic. And while we recognize the significant impact this has on families, the feedback we're hearing from principals is that the majority of families have been able to make other arrangements to get their children to school, and attendance has not had any significant impact with these canceled routes. But for those families that cannot make other arrangements, our teachers are continuing to provide work on the Hapara learning management system for those families. And as you heard from Superintendent McCabe, the majority of our virtual classes are now running well, and staff and students are becoming more familiar with the available resources. This really is largely thanks to the dedication of our staff and our administrators. Many staff did not find out their assignments till late in the process. Many were brand new hires for the first time going online. So they have done incredible work to be able to support our students. They're now working on routines for their classes. They're balancing the amount of synchronous and asynchronous work each day. And we are filling those small anomalies that still exist where there may be individuals having some challenges. And in terms of challenges, we are dealing with unfilled staff positions, both for in-person classes and for some of our virtual classes. Similar to our bus driver situation, the challenge really is related to the requirement for staff to stay home if they have any symptoms that's causing them to self-isolate, as well if a family member has symptoms. In the past, that might have been 1 or 2 days absence from a school, and this year it could be up to 14 days. So our principals are being as creative as they can be within the limitations of not mixing cohorts to try and address these shortages. In some cases, the work is being provided online. However, there's still a chance there could be no teacher on a particular day. Could be no early childhood educator, education assistants, or we may not have an office administrator available, depending on the availability of occasional staff on a day-to-day basis. So this situation is not unique to Ottawa. It's a provincial challenge. And given all the efforts that everyone is doing, again, it is a pandemic, and these are not normal scenarios that we can quickly resolve. But we continue to consider all available options to cover classes when a qualified educator is not available. And as Mr. McCabe mentioned, French teachers continue to be a challenge, both in person and virtually. We are doing our best to meet all the minutes wherever we can. And we're still looking at creative ways of making sure we have French teachers. Some of them are being asked to teach multiple courses. It is a best effort this year when we just don't have a big enough supply to have a perfect fit for every class. But we're actively monitoring it. And I need to say that our parental community has been very understanding and patient, as have our educators. So we're all working together to do our best and to provide quality education for everyone in both languages. I do want to speak to some of the confirmed cases of COVID-19. As of today, we have 9 students out of 45,000 that have tested positive for COVID-19, and 2 staff out of over 5,000 that have tested positive for COVID-19. This impacts 7 schools, with 1 school, as you know, that has been closed. This is not surprising given the community spread in the city of Ottawa. And while confirmed cases in any school are concerning, it is a sign that the system is working. We want students and staff that have any symptoms to stay away from school, and where they need to get tested. And once tested, Ottawa Public Health wants to minimize that risk by having a class or a cohort where needed, or possibly an entire school self-isolate for up to 14 days, as this eliminates the chance of any further spread. We do know that these trends will continue as more and more students and staff are tested. And with each case, we follow the lead of Ottawa Public Health in determining who needs to stay home and who needs to be tested. I would like to recognize Associate Director Mary Donaghy, who is our primary liaison with OPH, along with our communications team, for the compassionate thought that goes into addressing each confirmed case. Information that can be shared is shared. However, when dealing with personal health-related information, many of the details that both the public would like and our staff would like, we're just not able to share. And we continue to follow the direction of Ottawa Public Health on what we can and cannot share. In terms of enrollment, we are continuing to do new registrations, and we are trending slightly above our projections from last year for our total enrollment, which is good news. The growth we're seeing is at the high school level, and we've seen the greatest decline at the kindergarten level. So excluding St. Nicholas Adult High School, our enrollment as of today is approximately, these numbers will vary, 44,748. And when we include St. Nicholas, approximately 45,790. So those will change from week to week until we really get things settled sometime in October. I also want to provide the trustees an update on masks. So the question of masks in K-3 continues to be discussed. I want to share the most up-to-date information that we've received from Ottawa Public Health, which came this morning. So their position remains that it is safe for most children over the age of 2 to wear masks, but there's not enough evidence that all children will find it feasible to wear a mask correctly all day. So Ottawa Public Health continues to highly recommend that those who can do wear masks, but they have stopped short of making it mandatory. And we will continue to review the information with Ottawa Public Health. And if there is any change in that position, we can quickly implement that across our system. But for now, our recommendation is we continue with our strong recommendation to wear masks, but given the medical advice from the medical experts, we are not looking for any change in direction for K-3. Mr. Chair, that is my update on the successful return to school across our system. And thanks to our communication team, to the work of many dedicated staff in all roles across our board, and the support and input from many educational partners, including significant staff support from Ottawa Public Health and the leadership of our trustees, I'm very pleased with the startup that we've seen today. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Questions and comments? Trustee Armstrong.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Director D'Amico, very important for the students who graduated in 2019-20. Can you update us on the preparations for the graduations coming up?
I can, if Superintendent Frendo is available. I know she's had some very recent meetings with principals, so I would invite her to answer that question if she's available. If she's not, I can certainly provide a response.
No, I'm here. Thanks. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. We have had some meetings with our high school principals. And as you know, the graduation ceremonies aren't feasible at this time because that's just too many people in a school at the same time. So they tried to, they got a focus group of principals together to look at what's really, what do our students really need to take away with them, given that we are limited in our choices. So all of our high schools are putting together a virtual graduation ceremony that will be available to students on October 19th and then probably available afterwards as well. But they also decided that most of our students really want to have some kind of photo opportunity wearing a cap and gown. So what they have decided to do is they can't have all the students in the school at the same time, obviously. But on October 9th, which is a PD day for our high school, so none of our high school students will be in the building, they have invited each graduate to come to the building with 2 guests, more than likely parents. They will give them a one-time use cap and gown. In most cases, some schools had already ordered the other gowns and they have them in already, so they'll just have each student wear one and then have it cleaned. But they'll come in, they'll put on their cap and gown, they'll pose for a picture, possibly with their parents, and then they can take the cap and gown with them to have other pictures taken if they would like. So it certainly isn't a ceremony in the traditional sense, but it will give them both a photo opportunity and a video for them to keep as a memento.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Chair, if I can just add as well to Ms. Frendo's response, you may have heard that both the Premier and the Minister of Education are providing a scroll to every student from last year. So that's in addition to their diploma. So that's to recognize the unique situation of graduating during the pandemic. And as well, you will be reached out to either from our superintendent or from a principal in terms of either providing a written statement that can be read virtually or to produce a very short video. So that is a request will be coming this week as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Trustee Moore?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. I'd just like to say thank you to the staff for all the hard work and director himself. Thank you very much for all the efforts you put in, the late nights, early mornings, all-nighters. I'm sure there's a few of them. And thank you.
I was going to do that at the end. Absolutely echo that the hours that the staff's putting in and people at the directorate and Mary taking over the new position. Absolutely. Thank you for everything you're doing. Patrick.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I was just going to say what Trustee Moore said. As a student on like the ground floor, it's been super, I feel super safe. It's been super easy. And it's just nice to be back in the school learning in front of a teacher.
Great.
So I appreciate that very much.
No problem. Trustee Curry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I also echo what's been said about the hard work of everyone involved in starting up school again. I was just wondering, through you to the director, Tom, if you could give us any kind of update on how the system classes returned and whether there was any problems getting them up and going, or if everything went fairly smoothly with them.
Certainly, and our expert and the leader behind that has been Superintendent Sega. So if she's available, I'll have her respond to the trustee's question.
Yes, thank you very much. I would like to say to Trustee Curry that our system classes are still going strong. If students have chosen virtual, we are keeping their spots in the system class. So when they decide to return back to a system class, they have support there. Meanwhile, while they are in virtual, we are continuing to provide all the learning experiences that they need, and we are there to support them.
So they're not all in virtual though, are they? Some are in person back in their classrooms?
Most of them are face-to-face. All of our students with special needs, most of them are face-to-face.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Trustee Lawrence and then Director D'Amico.
Through you, Mr. Chair, and this is to the director. How is the boardroom coming along, Tom? Is there any possibility of when we might be back meeting in person?
Through you, Mr. Chair, just as the education sector is hit with challenges for the pandemic, so is the construction industry. So our timeline from the summer that was bumped to September has now been bumped to October. So it does not look like we will be back in person for the next board meeting. We're still waiting for the provider that won the contract to confirm the dates now. This will be the third time that they've had to change them, so I don't want to make any promises to the trustees, but certainly for the next meeting, I would anticipate, well, we will be online, and we're hoping by that last meeting in October, we'll either be in a hybrid situation with some online and some in person, but hopefully by the end of October, if not November. We will keep trustees updated with that project.
Thank you.
And Mr. Chair, if I could just, through you, make a couple of final comments. I don't want to leave the impression that things are running perfectly, because we know they're not. It is a pandemic, and staff are very much tired. Many are exhausted, and we're just getting towards the end of September. So in the education field, as you know, it tends to be cyclical, and normally by November is when people start to feel fairly run down and really getting ready for a break. And that's come early this year. And it's a combination of all of the unknowns, the uncertainty, but the thing that we all can't lose sight of is our staff are not operating outside of the pandemic. They're also impacted by the pandemic. Their worries and fears for their own families, they obviously know people that are contracting COVID. They're grieving as well what's been happening since March. So those are all realities that we all have to be conscious of, and we have to focus on relationships first. And we're also focusing on, wherever we can, students first and subjects second. So the mental health of our staff and our students is our priority this year, and then we will get to the academics. But when something doesn't get delivered right on time, or someone misses a lesson, that's not our priority. We will work it out, but we have to be patient with one another. So I do want to recognize across the system that this is tough. It's hard on everyone, and our staff are doing a great job, but we know many are struggling, and we're there to support them the best we can.
Yes, very much so. Thank you. Trustee Warren.
Thanks, through you, Mr. Chair. I just want to echo what everyone else is saying of the great work that you guys have done. I know this is uncharted territory. It's very new to everyone. We have parents who are going through a hard time. We have staff who are going through a hard time. The students, it's something they've never experienced in their life, and probably we may never experience this again in our lifetime, but just want to thank for all the hard work that you guys have done. In regards to the going back to the board, I'd like to get the Ottawa Public Health's recommendation on that as well, to see if it's recommended for us to go back in person. I think with the numbers spiking, and it doesn't make sense for us to rush back and just to be in person when this technology is working for us, and we are able to be very respectful and mindful of how we run the board meetings over the technology we have. So I just want to keep in mind, make sure we're not rushing back for the sake of rushing. I want to make sure that we are at least getting the viewpoint of what the OPH is saying, and making sure that it is safe and makes sense for us to come back at the right time.
Thank you for your comment. Trustee Whitted.
Thank you, Chair. Just quickly, one thing that I don't think we've touched on is childcare, and I'm wondering if someone could provide a bit of an update on the Ottawa Catholic childcare centers and how they're operating and integrating with their schools at this time.
Yes, I'll call upon Associate Director Mary Donaghy to respond to that.
Sure, through you, Mr. Chair. It's basically business as usual, but it has some restrictions due to COVID. So the restrictions or the guidelines for childcare are slightly different than they are for school. And so we're working with those guidelines. But whether it's tenants, our childcare corporation, or our extended day program that is run by the school board, we're always in partnership. So whether it's around safety protocols, whether it's around information, we're working as one, and both groups are being informed of any new changes. We could bring a fulsome report back at another time. I don't have all the data on every specific site, but I would just say that the numbers are smaller, that there are guidelines that childcare falls under because of our pandemic, but it is working very well and very similarly at different, with different numbers than it has in the past.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, moved by trustee Moore, seconded by trustee Curry, that the memorandum from the Director of Education dated September 17, 2020, entitled Update on School Startup be received. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. No new business, no notice of motions, confirmation of action reports. Moved by trustee Armstrong, seconded by trustee Warren, that the action report covering the period of September 8, 2020 be received. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Inquiries and administrative announcements. I have one announcement to say. On Friday, September 25th, the province celebrates Franco-Ontarian Day. This day officially recognizes the Ontario Francophone community's many contributions to our province. This day also commemorates the first unveiling of the Franco-Ontario flag in 1975. On behalf of the Board of Trustees, I want to congratulate and thank our Francophone educators and support staff. Your efforts contribute in making the OCSB such a vibrant and diverse system to learn and work in. I encourage students and staff to wear green and white this Friday as we celebrate Franco-Ontarian Day. Now I need a mover for adjournment, please. Trustee McHugh and trustee Warren. At 9:39. All in favor? Opposed? Carried.